Everyone, welcome to the Emunah Will Trust and Estate Planning Checkup. My name is Lori Zenisser, and I'm the CEO of Emunah of America. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We know many people don't have end-of-life plans, and hopefully many of you that are on here tonight, you do have a plan. And if you don't, we hope this inspires you to make one. I dare say this is one of the most important conversations that most of us are not having with our families. Talking about death, I promise you, won't kill you. But if you do talk about your end-of-life plan, it will give you and your family peace of mind. I see some familiar faces online, so bear with me for my quick summary of what Emunah does. Emunah is a social service agency in Israel. We have 5 residential homes for children who have suffered unspeakable, trauma. We have a women's shelter, daycare, an art college for women, high schools, summer camp program, and a crisis center in Sderot. Emunah serves 10,000 people a day. I'm going to assume that chesed has always been important value, in your life. For Jews, it really is. It's important to make sure family knows it's important for you to make sure your family knows what cheseds are important to you and where you'd like to leave a legacy gift. If you ever do consider annuity, I would suggest Emunah. Everyone who gets one with us outlives it. And we're very happy for our annuitants, but it really is a schus. So if you're thinking about including a charity in Israel, we hope you would consider Emunah, and that's my PSA for this evening. Now, with that, I'm really pleased to introduce tonight's presenter. Alec Bornstein is a partner with Borenstein, McConnell, and Culpin. He's an estate planning firm with offices in New York and New Jersey. Alex graduated from Loyola cum laude, I'm Canadian, we don't use that, but from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. He is admitted in New York and New Jersey and practices in both states in the federal courts. And Alex is an award-winning speaker and has been voted multiple times as one of the best estate planning lawyers for families, according to the readers of New Jersey Family Magazine. Alex is passionate about planning and loves working with clients to ensure they are prepared for any life's challenges. After speaking with Alec, I knew he was a great fit for Emunah. Alec lives in Teaneck with his wife and 2 boys who are in camp right now, giving Emunah the opportunity of Alec's gift of time. After Alec's presentation, there will be a Q&A. And Alec, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laurie. I'm just going to share my screen. And okay, here we go. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Laurie. Thank you to Ronnie and Ellie and everyone at Emunah. It's really a fantastic organization, and they clearly care about the people in the organization because they put together a program like this. Thank you all for everybody who's here right now. I know that there are definitely things that you'd rather be doing as opposed to talking about your demise at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, but we have a lot of good information, and I appreciate you being here, and it does say a lot about you. I've been on the other side where people have not done any planning for their families, and it's been a real mess. So you're here. It's important that you're here, and I really appreciate your being here to be part of this program. So Laurie already talked about me. I'm a partner in the firm. Right there's my dad and my mom also on the right, and my partner Aaron Calpin. We have offices, as Laurie said, in New Jersey and New York City. But enough about me. Let's just go right into the material. So tonight we're going to talk about 4 things, and each piece sort of builds upon the other. The first thing we're going to talk about is sort of an introduction to planning. There are certain fundamental things that even if you have a plan, and I'm going to assume that to a certain extent, most people here have some sort of a plan, or they have a sense of what a will is and what it could do from them. But generally speaking, there's certain fundamental issues that you need to understand as it relates to your planning. So we're going to talk about that to build a base, because once we talk about those fundamental issues and you have an introduction to planning, we're going to talk about what happens at various life changes. And that's what tonight is about, right? Tonight, we're going to have, I'm not a doctor. I might be a juris doctor, but I'm not an actual doctor. So I can't, the checkup that you're going to have tonight might be more of an emotional checkup than a physical checkup. But, the idea is you're undergoing certain life changes. So we're going to talk about things you need to think about during those life changes. Next piece is taxes, right? Taxes are important. Taxes are a big piece of planning, and it's important for you to understand what to do in those situations. So we're going to have a word on taxes in terms of what the taxes are and how the estate tax works for you. And, tonight really is about building a legacy. Like I said before, you're here because you care. You could be doing a million other things right now, but for you, you understand how important, what a legacy is, not just for your family, but for the world. And we're going to talk about how you can do that, how you can make an impact long after you're gone, and to a certain extent, even while you're alive as well. So we're going to talk about how that works. So we're going to dive right into introduction to planning. About a month ago, somebody came into my office and he gave, I got a very complete will filled with the wonderful, resume paper that a lot of these wills are written on. And I read through it and it was beautiful. I want this account going to this person, and this account going to this person, and this account going to this person. And, I looked at it and I said, wow, this is a fantastic will. What's going on? And I said, out of all these accounts, for this account and that account and that account, for all of these accounts, do any of these accounts have beneficiary forms? And the guy said, actually, all of these accounts have beneficiary forms. And I said, well, for all of these accounts that have beneficiary forms, do they correspond to the people that you say in your will who you want to receive all these accounts? And he said, actually, none of them are the same. Each account has a different beneficiary form than what I said in the will. Then I said to him, you want to know what? Your will is worthless. It's not worth anything. And so we're going to talk about why that is. Why was his will completely worthless? He had a beautiful will going to all these different places, but beneficiary forms that went completely to different places. So why is that? Well, the answer is that you've got three types of assets. The first type of asset you have is what is known as a probate asset. Everything you own fits into one of these three buckets. The first bucket is the probate bucket. The second bucket is the non-probate asset bucket. And the third bucket is the hybrid asset. What I conceive of is a hybrid asset. And I'm going to get more into that in terms of what I mean by that. So what are probate assets? Anything you own that is in your own name is what is known as a probate asset. Probate is actually a Latin word. It means prove the validity of, but what it really means is prove the validity of your will. So when you think of probate, think of your will. Think of assets that are in your own name, but also think about going through the court process. When you think of probate, think of court, right? And so when you assets that are in your own name, like real estate, businesses, bank accounts, those assets that are in your own name, if you have a will go through the probate process, will go through court, basically. Now, in that will, you appoint an executor who's responsible for executing your wishes, and that person also pays the bills and does all those types of things, in terms of your estate, and then eventually makes the distributions. But to get your assets from point A to point B, at the end, you go through court in order to make that happen. Those are probate assets that are in your own name. Anything you own that has a beneficiary form or is in a trust is what is known as a non-probate asset. Those assets are completely dictated by the form or by the trust. So let's say you say after tonight, you want to know what? I can't, at 8 o'clock tonight, I went to a program and I met the most amazing attorney named Alec. And in your will, you say, I want Alec to get my life insurance policy, right? But your beneficiary form says wife and kids. It's going to your wife and kids, regardless of what your will says. I will not be getting your life insurance policy, unfortunately, because in that situation, it's a non-probate asset. The form will always dictate what happens to that asset. So the reason why that guy came into my office and he showed me this beautiful will that had all these different accounts going all these different places, but the forms were completely different. It meant those non-probate assets, the form dictates what happens to the asset, not your will. Your will is completely worthless at that point. This is for life insurance, IRAs, 401ks. If you have a payable on death or a transfer on death concept, that's what refers to for your non-probate assets. So you've got probate assets, you've got non-probate assets, and a third bucket of hybrid assets, right? These hybrid assets are really joint assets. The reason why I call it hybrid asset is because while both people are alive, the asset is a non-probate asset. Your will doesn't matter. So if you've got a house and a house is owned by a husband and wife, and one person passes away, doesn't matter what the will says. Even if the husband says in his will, I hate my wife, she's the worst person in the entire world, I definitely don't want her to get the house. But he passes away first, it's non-probate, doesn't matter. The wife is getting it 100%. But once one person passes away, the asset transforms from being a non-probate asset into a probate asset where your will would dictate what happens to the asset. But the most important thing for you to know is that your probate assets and your non-probate assets, they have to talk to each other. You have to make sure that they're all part of the same plan. Because what you could have is you have your life insurance policy. Let's say you want your assets to end up in a trust for the benefit of your kids. You can do that. You can have your will, your probate assets create a trust, and then your non-probate asset, your beneficiary form, talk to your probate assets and say, I want this life insurance to funnel into the trust. So the most important, this is the key, this is the most fundamental concept in understanding how your assets work, and to understand that your assets need to talk to each other in order for them to have any effect. So that is the basic in terms of what types of assets you have. Now let's get to the basic, what are the basic estate planning documents? Again, I'm not going to really drill down per se. We're going to talk about it, but we're not going to drill it down because I'm assuming that most people here have a concept of what we're talking about. To the extent that you have any questions, obviously ask them and we can drill down even further at another time. But generally speaking, the heart of your plan is either a will or a revocable trust and a will. And whether or not you need a will or a revocable trust probably depends on what side of the Hudson you're on. If you're in New York, the New York probate, remember, trusts are non-probate assets, right? So anything in a trust would avoid court. If you're in New York City, the probate process in New York is so horrific. I have a client who died a year ago, and we're still trying to start probate. That's how hard the whole process is. And so the probate process in New York City is so bad that you really want to consider a revocable trust. In New Jersey, it's not as bad. It's sort of like a 50-50 proposition in terms of what you want, in terms of what you're going to get. But the heart of your plan is either a will or a will and a revocable trust. And so that's the heart of your plan. Another document, a very powerful document, is a financial power of attorney. Now, the key to a financial power of attorney is that it only works while you are alive. I had a client call me up about a few months ago and say, Alec, my aunt died and I got to deal with all of her stuff, but don't worry, I've got a power of attorney. I'm totally fine. I'm totally good. And I said, no, it's not going to help at all, because once a person passes away, the power of attorney is completely meaningless. But it's a very important document for when you're alive, because it'll help someone manage your financial affairs in case, God forbid, something happens to you. There's also medical power of attorney and a living will. Those are the terms in New Jersey. In New York, it's off, or other places, it's an advance directive or a healthcare proxy. Those are also very powerful documents, or the medical documents, so that people can make medical decisions on your behalf. A living will also says, to the extent that there's no expectation of recovery, pull the plug. If you are observant, there are also halachic documents that we prepare. So it's in accordance with Jewish law. So halachic living will basically says, I'm Jewish, I've, call these people, make decisions, call this rabbi, use this organization. That's a halachic living will. And halachic will deals a lot with the Jewish inheritance issues as it relates to that. There are beneficiary forms, which we spoke about. And then there's more complex planning with irrevocable trusts and deeper planning, if that's necessary. But this is the basic framework in terms of what your estate plan is going to be. It's going to encompass all of these documents. So we did an intro, we talked a little bit about assets, we talked about the elements of an estate plan, what goes into it. Let's really get to the heart of what we're here for, is to also talk about what happens when your life changes. And we're going to focus on certain life changes. The first life change that we're really going to focus on is what happens if you get divorced, or what happens if a spouse passes away. And there are certain things specific to that it's important for you to think about. The second life change is you got remarried. Congratulations. You didn't invite me to the wedding, so I'm not sure what's up with that, but still, we're going to talk about what happens when you get remarried. There are important things that you want to be thinking about in that situation. You got an inheritance. That's awesome. Your situation has changed dramatically, and not just an inheritance. What if all of a sudden your business changes and you've gone from being a small business to a big business? What are things you want to be thinking about when your financial situation has changed? Also, what if there's a special needs child in your family? There are important issues that you really need to talk about, need to think about within your family if there's a special needs child. I don't know if you can see the picture, but in the picture below, you have Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. They recently got married, Congratulations, your kids got married, right? That's fantastic. Your kids are married. You're probably broke right now. But even if you're assuming you're not broke and you still, you want assets to go to your child, children get divorced, things happen. And so there are ways for you to help arm yourself and your kids and your family in case you're worried about a spouse, or God forbid, a future ex-spouse for your children. And then grandchildren. Congratulations again. I hope the bris went well, but there are things you want to be thinking about when it comes to grandchildren and certain concepts that we're going to drill on a little bit tonight. So let's start with divorce. The number one thing, if you are divorced, the number one thing for you to do after a divorce is to change your beneficiary forms, assuming you can. Thankfully, in New York and New Jersey, they have statutes which say, let's say you have a spouse or an ex-spouse as a beneficiary for a life insurance policy, and you get divorced and you never got around to changing the forms. The laws in New York and New Jersey are, it's as if that ex-spouse is predeceased and it goes to the contingent beneficiary, the next level down, which is fantastic. But we're working on a case right now in my office where that happens. Somebody put a spouse at the time, now an ex-spouse as beneficiary, and then died and they got divorced and then died. And even though the law says it's going to end up on the next level, still we have to go through court. And depending on the financial situation, the financial institution, it could be a huge mess. And so you want to make sure that you do not have to, your family members don't have to deal with that. So if you or anyone is divorced and under their property settlement agreements can change their beneficiary forms, run, don't walk, change your beneficiary forms when this is over, because this is a big deal. You also might want to make changes to your will or to your estate plan, right? The things where the situation that you had before is different now, and you want to take people out maybe from your plan. And then also, as you get older, priorities change, right? As you get older, maybe if God forbid a spouse passed away, your priorities might have shifted. Maybe as you got older, you realize that Emunah is an amazing organization and you want to ensure that they receive something in your documents. And this happens all the time. If priorities shift, you want to make sure that you account for that. And so these are some things you want to be thinking about if you get divorced or if God forbid a spouse passes away. Remarried, again, congratulations. But let's say you're in the situation where now you have this spouse, but you have kids from a previous marriage, and you want to make sure that your assets end up with your kids from the previous marriage. What are you going to do? Well, there's a trust, a specific trust known as a Q-tip trust. Thankfully, it's not an actual Q-tip, it's a trust, but it's a Q-tip trust where basically you can provide for your spouse while they're alive, and when they pass away, those assets will end up with your kids from the first marriage or somewhere else, wherever it is you want to go. So it's a very important thing for you to, when you get older, getting older is really expensive. It's really, really expensive, especially in New York and New Jersey or Florida. It's so expensive. And so you really want to provide for that spouse, but you also want your assets to end up with your family, not his or her family. And so using a Q-tip trust is important. Also be careful with powers of attorney, because you might have old ones. You need to change them. You need to revoke them. Even with new ones, you want to talk to your family. This is the key is communication, because I guarantee you, if you don't tell your kids what's going to happen, hey, I'm supporting my spouse after I pass away, but don't worry, you guys are taken care of. If you don't have that conversation, they might challenge the documents. It could be a mess, and it has been a mess. And so the key is communication. Have these conversations with your family members. Be thoughtful about it, because the more planning you do on the front end, the less issues there'll be on the back end. Inheritance, again, you got a lot of money. Hope you take me out to dinner sometime, but now that your financial situation has changed, you had a simple plan, but now your life is complex. You might have tax issues. You might have a million different types of, your business might be growing. You might have business succession issues that you need to be thinking about. If your financial situation has changed, you really should be talking to someone to help talk about how you can take this simple plan and turn it into and make it more complex to deal with all the issues that you're having right now. Special needs. This is so important. I literally had a call today, and what happened was the situation is that this woman has a child who's about in her 20s who has special needs, is receiving governmental assistance, and her husband's father recently passed away, and the father passed away leaving assets to the special needs child. And if she receives those assets, it could theoretically basically kick her off governmental assistance. And I don't know if you've ever been on governmental assistance, but getting on, getting off is so difficult, and it's created a huge mess. And so if there's a special needs child in your, or not even a special needs, or child, just, an adult who's in your family and you want to leave assets to him, it is so important to have a supplemental needs trust. So important. And you can put insurance in the trust, but the idea is you want to get your family together and you want them to say, listen, hey, dad, hey, whoever it is, you want to have the conversation, because you might be trying to do a good thing by having assets go to a special needs child, but if you do it in the wrong way, it can be a disaster. And there are able counts that can help with that. There are also other types of trust that can help with it, but the idea is be thoughtful about it. Make sure that you do the planning, because otherwise it could be a really big mess. And that was the call that I had today, actually. Again, your kids are married, that's amazing, but we're worried about a divorce, right? So what you should do is you can leave assets to your kids in a trust. Keep the spouses out of the trust. And when I say matter of degree here, what I mean is it depends how nervous you are. Depending on how nervous you are, there's a spectrum of how intense the trust needs to be. It could be a lockdown trust where you're not worried at all about a spouse coming in, or there are advantages to having it a little bit more lax. It really is a matter of degree in terms of how you want to structure that trust. But it's very important if you're worried about an ex-spouse, you want to save your kids from losing their inheritance, you really want to think about a trust and how to leave assets to your kids in a trust. And then grandchildren, again, congratulations. There are trusts that you can put in your will. There are plans you can create. There are irrevocable trusts that we create all the time for grandparents. You really want to protect your grandkids from themselves. There are kids who are young you see it with celebrities all the time. There are kids who are young who receive too much money too early, and it just destroys their lives. And so the key is you really want to be thoughtful about how you're going to do it. And this is a way for you to be thoughtful about it. You can create certain trusts to talk about it. But to the extent that your life has undergone any of these changes, hopefully I've seeded some ideas in your mind about ways that you can change your documents or have a checkup in your documents to make sure that you're accounting for all of these different changes in your life. So let's move on to taxes. And again, we're going to take questions at the end. So we're going to talk about all this stuff at the end. So if you have any questions, we'll have it in the Q&A. Don't worry about it. But taxes. I know everyone loves talking about taxes, especially on a Wednesday evening at 8:30 at night. But let's start with the federal and New York State estate tax. In the picture, I don't know if you see it, but hopefully you see it. There's Biden with Governor Hochul giving him a hug. I think Joe Biden's in that picture as well. But obviously, people who love to tax. But right now on the federal level, good news. There's the federal exemption of $12,060,000. So if you're a single person and your estate is under $12 million on the federal level, don't worry about it. Now it is going to change. So it's important to know that it's going to change. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But at least today, on August 3rd, 2022, the exemption is $12 million and change. So that, let's say your estate is $15 million, right? God willing, your estate is $15 million. So 15 minus 12 is 3, right? You're $3 million over the limit. That $3 million will be taxed at a 40% rate. For a married couple, it's double, it's 24%. But so the overage is what's taxed on the federal level. In New York, it's different. It's a little bit worse, but on the federal exemption, the New York exemption is 6.11 million. So if your estate is 6.11 million or over, you can be taxed at 16%. But because it's New York, there's the cliff, and you have to be aware of the cliff. So what does that mean? Well, I told you a second ago that on the federal level, you're only taxed on the overage, whatever it is over that exemption number. New York is not like that. New York, once you get to about $6.5 million, you jump off the cliff. And remember, this includes life insurance if it's not in a trust. You jump off the cliff and the entire amount is taxed. The entire amount is taxed at 16% because they love money there. And they love taxing. So in that situation, the entire amount is taxed. So you really need to be aware of the cliff. This is where thinking about charities is such a huge benefit for clients who have to worry about that, because once you get off the cliff, you don't want the entire thing taxed. There are ways around that, and a lot of it has to do with what we're going to talk about at the end. One thing I said a second ago, is that on the federal level, remember, right now it's 12 million. This is set, if Joe Biden does nothing, this is set to go down in January 1st, 2026 to 5 million, adjusted for inflation could be about 8 million, somewhere in that. We're not really sure, honestly, what the exact number will be. So this is Biden, if Biden does nothing. So right now we're at 12. we're going down to 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not really sure what the exact number will be in 2026. But in that situation, then, so no matter what, the exemption is going down. Biden wanted it to be 3.5 million, so it's even worse, right? But still, you have to understand. So if you are in between those numbers, there's planning you can do today to account for it, because otherwise your family is going to be taxed. But so those numbers are set to go down. So today 12, in 2026 is going to be less. In New Jersey and Florida, as you can see, everyone's partying. Not just because they love to party in Florida. And I was just in Florida recently, actually, and there's a lot of partying, but still not just because they love to party there, but because there's no estate tax. That's fantastic. If your estate is $1 billion in New Jersey or Florida, and you have those assets going to lineal descendants, right? To a spouse, to kids, to grandkids, there is zero estate tax. New Jersey, to offset that, raised their gas tax about 23 cents. I don't know if you noticed a few years ago that our gas went up 23 cents, but that was part of the trade-off. So every time now you're pumping your gas, just be happy that your assets are going down. You don't have to pay estate tax in New Jersey, because we had the worst estate tax in the country. But because it's New Jersey, even though there's no estate tax, there is an inheritance tax in New Jersey. So what does that mean? If your assets are going to kids, grandkids, spouse, don't worry about it. There's no tax. Once your assets start going to a sibling, they go to a niece, they go to a nephew, they go to a friend. If it's not a charity, it's going to be taxed in New Jersey. So this is also another reason for you to seriously consider charities and, in that. So New Jersey has an inheritance tax, but has no estate tax. And in Florida, obviously has no tax because it's Florida and they don't tax at all. So that's why they're partying down there. But that's the tax issues, as it relates to the federal level, the New York level, the New Jersey level, and Florida. So let's talk about legacy. If you're here tonight, you're here because you want to leave a legacy. I mean, again, you could be doing a million other things right now, but you understand how important it is for you to leave a legacy. You understand that after you go, this isn't just about what you do when you're alive. It's also, what you do after you pass away. We have a thing in Judaism, obviously, where you say Kaddish, and the idea is that's a big part about, what a person left over in this world. And so you're here right now. The importance of leaving a legacy is so important. And as important as it is, it can also help you financially to think about it. There are tremendous tax savings as it relates to leaving a legacy and helping organizations after you pass away. And so we're going to talk about some common types of ways for you to do this, probably the most common types of ways for you to think about, to contemplate leaving a legacy, and how many of my clients have done it. And maybe there are some ways that you've been thinking about it. Or we're going to focus on 3 common types: planned giving, a charitable lead trust, and a charitable remainder trust. So first, the planned gift. So planned giving is the process of planning today to give a gift in the future. That's what a planned gift is. We do it all the time in our documents. And the way that you do it is we do it through wills, we do it through trusts. But the idea is that you have identified something, a charity or something that's close to your heart that you want to care for, and you plan today to give a gift in the future. Now, at the same time, you can give gifts of many different things, right? You can give a gift of cash. You can give a gift of a retirement fund. But remember what we said about beneficiary forms, right? If you want to give something to an organization, you want to make sure that your beneficiary forms are updated to reflect that. You can give real estate. There are many types of assets that you can choose to make your planned gift from. And as we were talking about before, there are tax savings for your estate. Again, like we talked about with the New York, with the cliff, that's something to think about. New Jersey has inheritance tax, and there are all other types of taxes that you can be thinking about. So there's also a benefit from a tax perspective, and which could help save your estate and the people who are going to be inheriting from you from a tax perspective. So that's the first type. That's the most common type. That's one we do every day. Getting a little bit more advanced, there's what is known as a charitable lead trust. So what that means is you, the donor, you create an annuity. So you put some cash in a trust for the benefit of a charity, where the charity is the lead. And every year for a certain period of time, the charity is receiving distributions. And then at the end of a certain period, the remainder will either come back to you or come back to your heirs. This is a great way for you to think about saving income taxes while you're alive. The charitable lead trust has a lot of income tax help. There's also some estate tax help, but it's a very big income tax. If you have an income tax bill that you're worried about, a charitable lead trust is something for you to consider. Or again, you give a gift, you give an annuity to the charity, they're receiving something every year, and then at the end, you and your family have a remainder. Probably what's a little bit more common is what is known as a charitable remainder trust. In the charitable remainder trust, the whole process is flipped, where you are receiving an annuity during either your lifetime, or maybe not you, maybe somebody in your family. You can create a will that has a charitable remainder trust, but or someone in your family is receiving an annuity for a certain period, and then the charity gets the remainder. We do these a lot, and this is something that's great, not only from an income tax perspective, but if you want to set yourself up for life, if you want to have annuities that really is just sort of hit exactly what you want to do, this is an amazing way to do it, because you can set yourself up for life. I have a client recently who's very charitably inclined, and he wanted to create an annuity for himself and his wife for their entire lifetime to make sure that they're set up for life, but he wanted the remainder to go to a charity. And so that's what we did. That's what a charitable remainder trust is. And so it's a fantastic vehicle, both from an income tax perspective and an estate tax perspective, to help you and to help a charity like Emunah at the same time. So let's just do a quick recap. We started talking about an introduction to an estate planning, right? We talked about your different types of assets. It's so important for you to get this. It's so important because you've got probate assets, assets in your own name that go through the court process. You've got non-probate assets where the form or the trust dictates what happens to those assets. And you've got hybrid assets, joint assets. And it's important for you to make sure that they talk to each other. We also talked the elements of planning, right? There are wills, there's revocable trust. That's the heart of your plan. There are powers of attorney, medical, financial powers of attorney, living will, there are halachic documents, beneficiary forms, which are so crucial, and we can get to even more complex planning. Has your life changed, right? So you divorced or somebody passed away. In that situation, remember what we said, change your beneficiary forms now. Make that happen, because otherwise, even if it's going to end up in the right place, it could be a mess to get there. And so that's something that's so important. You got remarried. Again, congratulations. I hope if you get married again, you do invite me the next time. But just in case you don't, if you can use what, I don't know if you remember, a Q-tip, not an actual Q-tip, although you probably should use an actual Q-tip, but a Q-tip trust to help ensure that you support your spouse and make sure that your kids from previous marriages or wherever it is your assets you want to go at the end, go where you want them to go. You got an inheritance or your financial situation has changed. That's fantastic. You had a simple planning, you want to think about complex planning. Special needs, there's a special needs child in your family. You need that trust, a supplemental need trust. It's so important. Married children, again, congratulations, but still you were worried about ex-spouses. So in that situation, create trust. And grandchildren, that's awesome. But you want to help save your children from themselves. And there are ways to create trust in order to do that. We talked about taxes. On the federal level, it's 12 million, but it's going to go down. In New York, it's 6.11 million. But once you get to 6.5, you jump over the cliff. It might make you want to jump over a cliff anyway, but still that's part of the problem. New Jersey, there isn't, and in Florida have no estate tax, but New Jersey does have an inheritance tax. So it's important to know that. And lastly, again, you're here to leave a legacy. That's why you're here. And the three most common ways to do that are through plan giving, where you create in your plan today, you put a plan together today so that in the future you may have a gift. There's a charitable lead trust and a charitable remainder trust, which is more complex, but they can give you even greater savings down the line. And it's a great way to help charities, and it's also a great way to help yourself. So those are things to be thinking about, as you're putting your plan together. So you all did great. The checkup was successful, and I thank you for your time. I thank you for being here right now. Just take down, if you are here tonight, you're eligible for a free estate plan checkup. So if you want, you can send me your information. You can just send my information is on this slide. Also, Lori's going to be sending around information later, so you can contact me. Just send me an email, say, I want my free plan checkup. I'll take a look at your current plan. You'll tell me about your current life situation. And I'll say, hey, things are good. Don't worry, there's nothing to do. Or these are some things that you really want to be thinking about, in terms of your documents. But in general, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And, any questions?
Okay, so Alec, if you could just one moment, if you could just take the PowerPoint down, that'd be great. So I just want to say, wow, thank you, Alec. That was really super informative overview on estate planning. It was a lot of info and a lot of, to think about. And I really, suggest that it be very, very complicated. So before everyone goes, I just wanted to say, before you hop off, I just want to thank all of you for joining. And on behalf of Emunah, Alec, and everyone, we wish you a long and healthy life to 120. And so feel free to hop off if you don't have any questions. And we're going to go to questions right now. So let's go. If anybody have a question, Saul, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Saul, can you unmute yourself?
I don't know if he's still here. I think Gail had a question before.
Okay, yes. So let's just read Gail's question. In New York, 20K of 401K distribution per year is tax-free. Is that the same for New Jersey?
So New Jersey is actually a little bit better. It does depend on how much you earn. Depending on how much you earn, it could be 75,000. There are other. It just depends. It just depends on how much you earn. Actually, that was part of the whole deal with the gas tax that I told you a second ago, when New Jersey's gas tax went up. So that was, that was one advantage to the whole deal, was that more of the distributions are tax-free, but it does depend on how much you earn. So, we could definitely get into a more extended conversation about that at another time if you have any questions.
Okay, anybody else? I'm just looking.
So I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. Selwyn?
Yes. So my wife and I moved from New York to New Jersey, and we have wills set up and but do we have to change those? They still have our address in New York. They have
No.
that. Do we have to? Is that good in New Jersey?
Totally. Yes, absolutely. I have clients who move all the time. I have clients who move to Florida. You're good. I mean, assuming that the documents say what you want them to say, you don't need to change them. You're totally fine.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? I'm looking. Okay, so just to let you all know, Alex, some people have requested if you could send the slides. So we are going to be sending out to everybody this evening. It'll be done in the morning, the recording, the slides, and, so that way and information if you want to contact Alec. If you have any questions, feel free, you can contact me. You can find me at emunah.org. And Alec, what's your
I'm sorry, I didn't want to drop off the meeting, but I have a question if that's okay. I'm sorry to interject.
No worries, go.
Sure.
Great.
Alex, by the way, first of all, thank you for your time and being able to share this. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
And obviously, I have a question. Obviously, we've probably spoken about this before, but it may be interesting for most folks. From a corporation perspective, either corporations in either the U.S. or overseas, and having living wills as well as trusts that may be international based as well as domestic. I know that there's complexities there depending on the country that you're involved with, but obviously some people may have assets in certain locations. Is that something that you can handle, and what is some of the concerns that you may have with that?
Great question. So it's very much a case-by-case basis, depending on the country and depending on what the issues are. We have a lot of clients who live in Israel and have a number of assets in Israel. The best rule of thumb is to have two wills, one will handling your assets here, one will handling your assets overseas. That's usually the best case. We also create international wills, which are generally allowed in other places. It can be a little bit of a pain sometimes to probate those assets in those places, depending on the situation, which is why a lot of times having two wills is the best way to go. But just generally speaking, it really is it's kind of a case-by-case situation. So, to sum up, usually either two wills or to have an international will. There is also, the U.S. has treaties with certain countries as it relates to taxes also. So that's going to be a very big piece of what you do. New Jersey, the U.S. does not have a treaty with Israel as it relates to, I don't know if Israel is the country you're thinking of, but does not have any treaties. It does have treaties with Canada, doesn't have treaties with Israel, but So it just depends. It's really a case-by-case situation depending on the country that you're talking about.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you have a separate, you have an apartment in Israel and you have a will dealing with that apartment, does your will in America have to mention anything about that?
Usually we have something saying that there's a conversation happening, meaning I have a will here, I have a will there, or so usually it doesn't mention the apartment per se, but it could mention that you have a will somewhere else. So one thing that's important to know though is that a lot of times for most wills, on the top of the will it says, I hereby revoke all other wills that I have. When it comes to these situations, you want to make sure that language is not in there, because if you're having two wills at the same time, you don't want them to revoke each other. So that's one key issue as it relates to something like that. But just generally speaking, when you do want to, you can talk to each other, you can have the wills talk to each other, but you don't mention specific assets. You just might mention I have another will somewhere else.
Okay, and I also have a question about the charitable lead trust. How is that different from buying a charitable annuity? And you are giving them the X amount of money, but you're earning on it while you are alive.
Well, so you're not, when it comes to the lead trust, you yourself are not receiving anything until after the term is over, or family members are not receiving anything until the term is over. So maybe to the extent that it's invested well, the asset, whatever it is gaining in the amount, it's growing. But in terms of what you're receiving, you're not receiving anything. The charity is receiving everything during the term, and then after, you or your family would receive whatever's left over.
That's what I thought was the remainder trust. There, you mentioned two trusts.
So yes,
One
no,
is
I'm
what
sorry,
you just
I might have misspoke there. Yes, the charity is receiving it during the term. That's the lead trust, right? The charity is receiving it during the term. You or your family is receiving the remainder. That's the lead trust, right? The charity is the lead. It's the lead in terms of receiving payments.
Okay. So
And
what
then
is the remainder trust?
the remainder trust is you are receiving the annuity. You're the
Yeah.
lead, so to speak. You're receiving the annuity during your lifetime. And then
Uh-huh.
once you pass away, or during a certain term, depending on the situation,
Yeah.
then the charity receives the remainder. The charity has to receive at least 10% of whatever it is you put down, of the principal you put down. But and that has certain advantages as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? You can unmute yourself, ask a question.